Welcome to Film and Page. I'm Dominic. I have two friends who are both fans of a lot of the same things I am. Science fiction, comic books, superhero movies, and all that stuff. Also, Star Wars and Star Trek. However, if you ask each of them which one they prefer, you'll get completely opposite answers. One is first and foremost a Star Trek fan, with the other being clearly a fan of Star Wars over Star Trek. There is no hesitation or doubt in their answers. I was thinking about this one day when I asked myself the same question. Which do I prefer, Star Trek or Star Wars? Honestly, it was a question I couldn't easily answer, and it took some thinking to figure it out. These are two science fiction properties that I've been a fan of my whole life. They both have been integral parts of my childhood. I have a lot of good memories tied to both. They both have had their ups and downs over the years. However, which one do I like more? If one had to stay and one had to go, which one would I pick? This was a question I never really thought about before, and it was a question I couldn't answer when put on the spot. So I figured I'd make a video and try to compare the two, maybe doing a point system, picking out things I liked about one more than the other because I really didn't know the answer. I think the lightsaber is a cooler sci-fi weapon than a bat'leth, so that would have been a point for Star Wars. However, that didn't really work. How do you go through two vast fictional worlds trying to compare everything across the board? You just really can't. I decided that kind of video wouldn't work. While thinking about all of this, I did come to a definitive answer as to which one I like more. Still, I'd like to compare some parts of them, because I do think there are some things that one does better than the other. I'll start with starship design. While I do like the ships in Star Wars, this is one I have to give to Star Trek. I think overall the ships in Star Trek are more diverse in their design and better looking. The reason being is because in Star Trek you have more galactic powers, like the Federation, the Klingon Empire, the Romulan Empire, the Borg, the Cardassians, and the Dominion. They're all pretty distinct looking from each other, so this naturally lends itself to having a lot of different looking ship designs. Not only that, the motion picture refit Enterprise is my favorite ship in all of science fiction. Where in Star Wars you have two galactic powers, the Rebels and the Empire in the original trilogy, with the Rebels having this ragtag fleet, and the Empire having a fleet of ships that look very similar, that wedge triangle shape of the Star Destroyers. In the prequels, we get to see some more ships when we are introduced to the Naboo, the Republic, and the Trade Federation. This gives us a look at some more different looking designs, and I have to say I really like the Trade Federation's droid control ships. Then the Disney sequels come along, and we get the Resistance, whose ships look like the ones the Rebels had in the original trilogy, only slightly updated, along with the New Order, which is just the Empire all over again, so nothing really new there. However, one area of design Star Wars wins by default is the one-man starfighter design, because Star Trek really has no one-man fighters. They have shuttlecraft and runabouts, but they are more short-distance transports and not fighter craft. In Star Wars, you have the X-Wing, TIE fighters, Vulture droids, Jedi starfighters, Naboo fighters, and on and on. So Star Wars has always given us cool space fighter craft and awesome dogfights in space. Now, when one thinks about starships in science fiction, one can't help but think about epic space battles. And when it comes to this, in my opinion, it's a bit of a draw. Because my favorite ship-to-ship battle is from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. The battle between the USS Enterprise and the USS Reliant is iconic, with the submarine-like final battle inside the Mutara Nebula, a battle of wits and wills between Kirk and Khan. However, my favorite battle between two fleets of ships is the final battle between the Rebel Alliance and the Galactic Empire at the end of Return of the Jedi. You have huge capital ships blasting each other, and swarms of fighters, along with the second Death Star blasting the Rebels with its super laser, and the Millennium Falcon flying inside the superstructure. You literally have the galaxy's fate hanging in the balance. Now, when it comes to the cast of hero characters, I think this is where Star Trek outdoes Star Wars. In the original trilogy, you have this fantastic cast of heroes: Luke Skywalker, Leia, Han Solo, Lando, Yoda, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Chewbacca, and the droids. All iconic characters, but Star Wars, in my opinion, never really achieved that kind of iconic cast after. The prequel's cast of heroes was weak in my opinion, with really the only standout being Ewan McGregor's Kenobi. Hayden Christensen as Anakin never really worked for me. As much as I like Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon, his character always felt unnecessary, and it should have been Obi-Wan in that position. Natalie Portman as Amidala was fine, but that cast never seemed to gel the way the cast of the original trilogy did, and no Star Wars film or TV show has since. Where in Star Trek you have Kirk and his crew, and then right after them you have Picard and his crew. Just those two casts wipes the board if I stop there. Then you get another great cast with Deep Space Nine, and it goes on. However, when it comes to villains, I have to say that Star Wars is in the lead here. Two of my favorite villains in Star Trek is Khan from TOS and Gul Dukat from Deep Space Nine. However, as much as I like them, Darth Vader and the Emperor leave them in the dust. Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious, was my favorite thing about the prequels, and Luke's face-off with Vader and the Emperor in Return of the Jedi are some of my favorite scenes of the original trilogy. Then you have Darth Maul, which was easily one of the best things about The Phantom Menace. His outright evil look was iconic the second people saw it, and I'll always maintain that it was a mistake to kill him off so soon. Also, the Sith as an evil organization I've always found much more interesting and fascinating than, say, the Borg, the Dominion, the Romulans, or any other antagonistic group in Star Trek. I find the lore behind them very interesting, and I've always liked the idea that even though there are usually only two at a time, they can still be such an enormous threat to the galaxy. I've always found the Sith to be much more interesting than the Jedi. Also, both franchises have a vast universe of tie-in material, from video games, books, and comics. With Star Wars, this is called the EU, Expanded Universe, and with Star Trek, it is called Beta Canon. Here, like the space battles, I'm going to have to call this one a draw as well. Now, I will admit, I have read more Star Wars novels than I have Star Trek. However, the best tie-in novel I have ever read is Star Trek Federation, published in 1994 and written by Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens. The story revolves around Zephyrin Cochrane, the inventor of warp drive, and his arch-nemesis, which chases him across time, trying to find the secret of the ultimate weapon, the warp bomb. These events will also bring together the characters of the original series and the next generation. Now, when it comes to the comic books, this situation is flipped. I've read many more Star Trek comic books than I have Star Wars comic books. However, my favorite tie-in comic book of all time is the 6-part miniseries Star Wars: Tales of the Jedi, Dark Lords of the Sith, by Dark Horse Comics, that ran from October of 1994 to March of 1995, written by Tom Vitch and Kevin J. Anderson, featuring amazing painted covers by Dave Dorman and interior artwork by Chris Gossett and Mike Barrera. The story is set 3,997 years before the events of Star Wars A New Hope, or 3997 BBY, before the Battle of Yavin, and follows two young Jedi, Ulic Qel-Droma and Exar Kun, as they take separate paths that lead them both to the dark side, one in a quest of revenge for the death of his Jedi Master, and the other out of curiosity about ancient Sith artifacts. As for video games, I have never been much of a gamer, so this is a bit of a wash. Also, I have never played a Star Wars or Star Trek game that I thought was memorable, so most of my experience of each tie-in universe have been through comics and novels. Now, one thing that Star Wars has a clear-cut advantage on over Star Trek is visual continuity. You can watch A New Hope that was released in 1977, The Phantom Menace released in 1999, The Force Awakens released in 2015, or the most current episode of The Mandalorian. It all looks like it exists in the same universe. Whereas Star Trek, the original series, from a visual standpoint is very different from the 6 movies that were spun from it. This can be excused because Star Trek started as a 60s sci-fi TV show and was restricted by the budget and VFX technology of its day. Then, from the 6 original films and The Next Generation up until Enterprise, the visual look stayed pretty consistent. It all looked as if it existed within the same universe. Then we get the Kelvin Timeline films that rebooted the series from a storytelling point, but also from a visual standpoint. It updated and reinvented the look of Star Trek. This could have been waved away as it was supposed to be an alternate universe. However, this new visual style would carry over to Star Trek Discovery, which was supposed to be in the Prime Timeline, with the biggest grievance a complete redesign of the Klingons, which was completely unnecessary and made no sense, which they started walking back with the second season. Things have gotten to looking a bit more consistent with Strange New Worlds and Star Trek Picard Season 3. There is one advantage Star Trek does have over Star Wars, and it is a substantial one in my opinion. That is, with Star Trek you can tell a much wider range of stories than you can with Star Wars. I don't think you could do stories like The City on the Edge of Forever or Inner Light in Star Wars. It's not that you can't tell great stories in Star Wars, you obviously can, but I think you can tell more kinds of stories within Star Trek. Those are a few comparisons of things I cherry-picked that I think one does better than the other. But now on to my definitive answer and how I decided on it. I brought it all back to the first incarnations of these two franchises that really hooked me and made me love them. With Star Trek, it was the reruns of the original series that constantly played on television throughout my entire childhood. I loved this show and watched it religiously growing up, despite having seen the episodes over and over again. With Star Wars, it was the original trilogy, which was also a constant part of my childhood. I remember first seeing Star Wars: A New Hope when it was shown on television, and then got to see The Empire Strikes Back along with Return of the Jedi through video rentals. So I asked myself, if I had to make a choice, I could keep one and get rid of the other, never to view it again. Which one would I pick? Would it be Kirk and crew of the original series, or would it be Luke and his friends of the original trilogy? When I put it into that perspective, it became clear. The question I never really thought about and didn't really know the answer to had an answer. I chose Star Trek, the original series, over Star Wars, the original trilogy. The reason is that as a TV series you watch weekly or even daily at some points, you become much more attached to the characters as opposed to characters in 3 movies. And even though you love the films, you might watch them once a year or even go several years without seeing them. Star Trek was more of a constant, with the original series in constant reruns and new films coming out. Then a brand new series in 1987 with The Next Generation, and on, where Star Wars ended in 1983 with Return of the Jedi, and there wouldn't be another Star Wars film for 16 years. So that is how I came to my answer. However, fortunately for me, I don't ever have to make that choice, and I can continue to enjoy both. And that's everything I have to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one. I'd like to say thank you to all of my subscribers. I appreciate you all in helping this channel grow. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when new videos are uploaded.